Sharon's younger sister, Darlene, is a middle child. They have 6, and Sharon's the oldest. And we have some fun with her about how middle children often get overlooked. And I recall one time we were on vacation together with Darlene, her husband Ron, Sharon and I, and we're at some kind of a vacation destination. Anyway, there was a woman that had a T-shirt on, a shirt that said, "Middle Sister." And I pointed it out to Darlene. I said, the only problem with that shirt is the print should be about this small. Have you ever felt invisible or forgotten? It's a common feeling. And the need to be seen is it's a fundamental human need that leads to a great variety of benefits to us. We feel validated, connected. Motivation often comes from that. We develop feelings of trust and acceptance, understanding, love, respect, and belonging. However, when people don't feel seen, they can experience feelings of self-doubt and insecurity, lower self-esteem, depression, anxiety, and anger. Well, we're going to be talking today about being seen. Now, as we enter into the second phase of our series on the names of God, last month it was all about the names associated with Jesus. Today we're going to be, and then this month of January, we're going to be focusing in on the names that relate to God as a whole, God the Father. And there's an excellent article, if any of you use the Bible Project app, or you just want to go to their website, it's just the Bible Project. They are the ones who are responsible for the videos about various books of the Bible, kind of explaining them, and it's very, very helpful. And they have a series of articles as well, and there's an article by a guy named Tim Mackie, who is their education fella, and the name of the article is "God Has a Name," many actually, and you can know him on a first name basis. And anyways, he points out how God is known by a lot of different names, which is exactly why we're doing the series that we're doing. And one of the reasons for that is because God reveals himself to people in the language and the concepts and the cultural context of that specific group of people. And so, because every culture, every group of people is different, God will, if we really want to understand the significance of the Bible in our time, we've got to try to understand what it meant to them in their own time. And so that's the process of interpreting the Bible. And so the various names of God that appear in the book of Genesis are the names that are connected to the ways that the ancient Near Eastern people, the people of that time, thought about the gods. And so the names that were given to God relate to a response to the religious ideas of that ancient group of people, and an effort to try to redirect their attention from their false or lesser gods to the one true God. So, all that to say, it would be a very good article for you to read. And he points out there's 3 primary names of God that appear in the Old Testament. And I want to just give you a brief explanation on them this morning before we get into our God who sees. So, the first one is the word El or Elohim. And now there's one of the programs that Pastor Sharon enjoys watching is a house flipping show with a man named Tarek El Moussa. And he and his various wives, he's been married a couple of times, they flip houses and they show you how it's done. Now, he is Lebanese. His father was a Catholic, so a Christian Lebanese person. And so his last name, El Musa, comes from the Arabic. And El in the Arabic, in that name situation, is simply the word the. So I guess if you were to translate his name, it would be Tarek the Musa, or Tarek of the Moses group. Now, that is not, I was confused by that, and I'm like, is he trying to say he's a God? No, it's just kind of a way that they do the naming. So the word El or Elohim among the ancient Israel's neighbors, they referred to their most powerful god was El. And so El is kind of like the word Christ. Remember we taught you last month how that's really more a title than it is a name? Well, El or Elohim is the plural of that, but it's kind of a title for God. Now, it can refer to many gods, but the chief of many different gods, if that's making any sense to you. So El or Elohim appears more than 2,000 times in the Old Testament. And it's Elohim is the longer, the plural form of El. So the Israelite people, when they use this title of El, trying to relate to the other neighbors around them, it's not that they believed that they were all worshiping the same God. That's one of the things you'll hear. Well, isn't, Muhammad and Islam, aren't we all worshiping the same God just under different names? No. There is one God, the one true God, who manifested in the New Testament through the person of Jesus. And so it's not that they believed that their neighbors all were part of this same thing. They were just kind of drawing from their neighbors to say, okay, we got the real one. Now that's a pretty bold assertion, isn't it? And in today's world, people would react against that. Like, who are you to think you got the real one? Well, it's not us who think it, it's he who said it. And it is truth and it's reality. So there's El or Elohim 2,000 times. There is another word that the word Yahweh. Pastor Scott is going to be preaching on that at the end of the month. But in the Bible, the English Bible, and in Hebrew, the word God is not a name but a title. Yahweh is the name, we should say, of God. And it's made up of 4 Hebrew letters, and really YHWH is how we transliterate that. Now, the Hebrew Bible didn't have vowels in it. They just used their consonants. So we threw some consonants in there, and that's how we come up with Yahweh. But it's possible that they might have even called him the great Yahoo. We don't know that, but it's a possibility of it. Yahweh is the second name, is the name for God, and so it's kind of like saying this God is the big one, the creator of all. So El is the title, Yahweh is the name. Does that make sense to you? The third one that shows up is the word Jehovah. Now, about 100 to 200 years before Jesus came, the Jewish people, out of respect for who God was, they wouldn't even write or say his name because he was so revered. And so even today, if you read anything that's written by Jewish people, particularly the Orthodox ones, they will spell G-D. You've perhaps seen that. It's because to them it is so reverent that they cannot even say the name of God, Yahweh. So about the year 200 or 300, whenever they saw the four letters, Yahweh, rather than say his name, they would insert their own word, Adonai. So the word read, if you looked at the word, it was Yahweh. But they would say Adonai, which is Lord. So they just saw the word, but they didn't want to say the holy name of God, so they would say the Lord. So the Lord God Almighty. So that was happened about a couple hundred years before Jesus came. Now, about 500 or 600 years after Jesus came, they inserted some of the vowel sounds from Lord. So they took the word Lord, the vowels of that, Adonai, and they threw it into Yahweh and came up with the name Jehovah. And that's where the name Jehovah comes from. Now, have I completely confused you? Okay. So you've got El is the title. Yahweh is his name, but they didn't want to say his name, so they ended up calling him Jehovah. That's the simple, basic names of God that we see throughout the Old Testament. The title El, the name Yahweh, but they ended up pronouncing it Adonai or Jehovah. Now, with that as a backdrop for our series, and if you want to dig a little deeper or try to understand this a little bit better, go to that article in the Bible Project by Tim Mackey that I referenced and might help you. So, let's talk today about the God who sees. And there's Hagar in the book of Genesis, chapter 16, where we're going to be looking. Hagar is an Egyptian servant, and she gets caught up in a family conflict between Sarah and Abraham, husband and wife. And she experiences rejection and pain. After becoming pregnant, she faces mistreatment, flees into the wilderness, feeling alone and abandoned. Let's read it. Genesis chapter 16 says, Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children. And she had a female Egyptian servant whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said to Abraham, Behold now, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children, so go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her. And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. Now, let me just pause here and say, you have to understand that in the Bible, it tells things as they are, not always as they should be. And you'll very shortly realize how stupid that was. It was a common custom of their day, but by putting it in there, God isn't saying, go have babies with your nanny. You know, it's not, just don't, okay? Just don't. So after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, as a wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Problems. Sarah said to Abraham, Look what you did to me. May the wrong done to me be on you. That's what she's saying. And I could imagine him saying, you told me to do it, but some things don't always make sense, do they, guys? So, Abraham said to Sarah, behold, she's your servant, she's in your power, do whatever you want. So Sarah dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, servant of Sarah, where have you come from and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing from my mistress Sarah. The angel of the Lord said to her, return to your mistress and submit to her. The angel of the Lord also said to her, I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered for multitudes. And the angel of the Lord said to her, behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, which means God hears, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God of seeing. For she said, truly, here I have seen him who looks after me. Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi, which means well of the living one who sees me. It lies between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abraham called this name of his son, who Hagar bore Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abraham. So, two major issues here is one, they're having kids when they're 86 years old. Got any 86-year-olds be excited about having another kid right now? I can't imagine that. I can't imagine that. But it's part of God's plan. And the other part is they tried to make it work their own way rather than following God's plan. And do you know that today, this is the beginning of what is happening in the Middle East today, the Arab-Israeli problem. It spawned that mess. Do it God's way. Living together, having kids with multiple partners. Just a mess. So, Hagar, lonely, fearful, rejected, and God sees her. God went after her. She wasn't out there in the wilderness looking for God. She was hiding from her mess. And she encountered God because God went after her. And he called her by name. You know what that meant? She found out that she was known and valued. She was seen. So, God gave a promise to her. He said, you're going to have more kids than you know what to do with. And your son Ishmael's got a future. And Hagar responded, she said, you're the God who sees me. You're the one who sees me. El Roi is the actual title of that. The most popular movie of all time, and they rank movies by how much money they bring in at the box office. The most popular movie of all time is what? Avatar. He works at a movie theater. Yeah. So, if you want to know anything about movies, you go to Isaiah. Avatar was number 1, and Avatar number 2. The Way of the Water, Avatar, was number 3. So I'm going to assume that most people have seen it, and they have a fictional race of people called the Na'vi. These are tall, blue, humanoid type of things, and they live on the moon Pandora. And there's a picture of one of them, and they would say in their language, in the Na'vi language, they would say, well, nati kamei. What does that mean? Well, nati kamei. Isaiah, do you know what that means? It means I see you. We've got some fan of Avatar. I see you. Now, to them, that meant much more than just visually, I see you, but it was kind of like a spiritual kind of seeing. We might say, I get you. I get you. You know, and so it's like an understanding of somebody in a very profound level. Here's the deal. That's the kind of seeing that the God who sees does. He doesn't just notice and recognize and say, oh, wow, you're going through a tough time right now. Or, wow, that was pretty cool what I just saw you do. But he sees our internal struggles and circumstances and fears and hopes. He really sees all dimensions, all parts of that. So if there's anybody who will ever get you, it's the God El Roi, the God who sees. And he cares. Compassionate, active. He provides and guides. He says, yeah, Hagar, you need to go back there because this is part of a bigger plan. And I offer you this hope. That is the God who sees. Now, let me tell you an experience that Sharon and I had in March of 1989, before we came here. And I haven't felt free to tell this because it happened at a marriage encounter. And there are a couple of surprising things that happen to people who go on marriage encounters. And Pastor Scott and Gina, they just shared back about a month or so ago, he shared about how God powerfully met them, supernaturally met them on a marriage encounter. Well, it was a different thing, but the same God met us on this marriage encounter. And so let me lead up to tell you the story of why we went on this marriage encounter in March of 1989. We had just come through a very tough time in our church that we were serving, the second church we had served, and the second pastor under whom we were serving that had some moral problems. And so we were about 8 years into our ministry, 7.5 years into our ministry, and it was a place of great turmoil and disgust, and caused me in particular, but I think Sharon too, to say, we are not going to let something like that happen to us. And our attitude was pretty harsh, I should say. And somebody told us about these marriage encounters, hadn't heard about them before, said God does some great things. So the church we were serving, we had the full load of that church on our shoulders because the other pastor had to leave ministry. And we were under a lot of pressure. And we found out that there was a marriage encounter we could go to in Minnesota. Now, God worked out an opportunity for somebody to step in and lead the church for that weekend so we could get away, much needed get away. And I was like, man, we could use this break. Oh, it'll be great to sit by a pool and, relax a little bit. What I didn't know is they actually kicked somebody off that weekend in Minnesota so that we could go to it, because some of the leaders knew, what we needed, and so they told somebody, said, listen, we need this pastor to go. And a marriage encounter is not like that if you've ever been to one of them. You get a little break in the afternoon, but it's a working weekend, but a supernaturally powerful weekend. So, went to it with a chip on our shoulders that was like, we are not going to be a pastor that messes up. At the very, and it was a challenging, it was a very tough weekend, but ultimately a very good weekend. And I would encourage everybody to go to a marriage encounter. It's not just like any other marriage retreat. It's structured in such a way that it floats to where the need exists. So we were going through this, and in fact, I remember Saturday night, we were struggling so greatly. They said, Sharon, we can get up in the middle of the night and just leave this place if you want. She said, yeah, that wouldn't be a cool thing to do. We stayed and we worked through, and at the very end, they did something then that they don't do now. They had people praying for you throughout the weekend who then came in and presented you a candle and said, we want you to know we've been praying for you throughout the weekend. So we know nobody, we're in Minneapolis, we know nobody else, and this big line of people come in, and here standing before Sharon and I with a candle saying, we've been praying for you through the weekend, was a youth pastor that we had known from the Milwaukee area who had to leave ministry because of some moral problems. And he and his wife went back to Minneapolis. He was working for his father-in-law, and they were working on their marriage, and God restored their marriage and put it back together. And when they stood before me, it was if God took his fingers and flicked that chip off my shoulder and said, I restore people. I rebuild people. It was a supernaturally, nobody could have made that situation happen but God himself, because he saw us. He saw the pain we were in. He saw the arrogance and the chip on our shoulder. And he orchestrated a situation where probably the last person in the world I would have wanted to encounter was another minister that had a problem. And he said, I see you, Rich and Sharon. And I want you to know that I restore people who are broken. And they don't do that anymore. I think that went away with the COVID thing, is what Pastor Scott told me. So we've had a Hagar moment. And I'm here to say that God sees you too. He gets you. He understands you. And he's the God who sees. I want you to stand. Perhaps you have felt not seen. Maybe it's an episode of your life you're going through. Maybe it's been that way. Maybe it's your middle child syndrome of some type. Maybe you were raised in a family where one of the other siblings could do no wrong and you could do no right. I'm here to say that God sees you. Maybe you're just going through a tough time and you're in a wilderness under a tree, dealing with an employment situation that's just unbearable. I'm here to say that God calls you by name. He comes after you. Whatever it is, I want you to give it over to God. I want you to say, God, I've heard that you see me. I want to feel that you see me. Let's sing our song here.